Hello folks, and welcome to episode 1 of what will be approximately 4 videos covering an instrument flight from Liverpool to Blackpool. I'm filming it or recording it with the GeForce Experience app, and I'll also be using the latest version of Flight Simulator as well. So I'll launch that now, and I can just have a bit of a talk about what I'm planning to do just as we're launching the game. So basically this flight is an instrument flight from Liverpool to Blackpool. I'm going to do it over about 4 videos. The first one, probably try and keep them to about 15 minutes long, and the first one is going to cover just setting up the flight on Flight Simulator itself, and then also just a little bit about the aircraft setup as well, and the instruments. And it's probably going to take us to just about the point where we start the taxi, or if we've got time, we'll start the taxi and then get to the holding point where we'll do the power checks and the pre-takeoff checks. But I'm just going to try and keep it about 15 minutes long each video. The second one's going to cover the initial standard instrument departure up to Wallasey. And then the next one after that is probably going to cover a bit of the en route section, and also the tracking to the tracking an NDB to the hold at Liverpool, a couple of holds, and then a RNP or a GPS approach to land or to go around effectively at Blackpool. But we may land there on this one, I don't know, we'll just see yet. So yeah, as this game just loads up, this is something that I'm doing at the moment for my instrument rating. I've completed I got my PPL approximately 4 years ago, and got my CPL a couple of years ago as well, towards the end of 2019. And basically I've completed multi-engine training, and I'm currently doing the multi-engine instrument rating. And this is certainly one of the flights that we'll practice quite a bit as well for that training. So it's useful to kind of practice and try and keep currency whilst not flying due to various reasons, aircraft technical issues and various different things. So it's a good one to practice, and I hope you'll find it useful to follow on if you want to recreate this route yourself. As always, any feedback you've got, any comments, if you think it's good, or you've got any suggestions for it or ways that could improve it, then please leave those in the comments section, and I'll read all of those and get back to you on them as well. So just as we start to wait for this to load up, the latest version of Flight Simulator, really good. It's basically plotted the whole world pretty much, so you've got a lot of real world mapping, and a lot of very realistic terrain as well. And of course with this one we're going to have real world weather and real world traffic as well, so it's a great platform to use. So here we go, we've got the initial page, so we'll go to the world map first of all. And then we'll zoom into Liverpool, so I hope you'll find this useful. So the Liverpool airport, I've got one of the latest versions, which is an add-on, which makes it very realistic, covering details of Raven Air and the airport's a higher level of realism. So we'll select that, and we're going to start it off from a taxi from a parking area on the apron. So if we go zoom into details, and then we'll select this ramp 5, which is near to Raven Air apron. So that's a good one to do, so we'll set that as a departure. The arrival airport we will select as Blackpool. And then what we're going to do is go on to to select an instrument route. So we're going to go low altitude airways, and then it's already given us a Wallasey to Tango departure, so that's the departure loaded there. From Wallasey, what we're going to do is recreate this route, where we would go for Penhill, which is a GPS navigation point. So Penhill, and now we've got that there, so we can add that waypoint, and now we can just zoom out and we've got the standard route there. So just explain a little bit about this. I want to just make these videos really leveling them at someone who's not got any experience of flying, that may find it interesting what goes into it. But obviously I may well do further videos of a bit more of a technical nature later on if people would find those useful. So yeah, Wallasey 2 Tango is a standard instrument departure, so we're going to be taking off from runway 27, and we're going to follow the departure route to intercept the appropriate radial from Wallasey. So what this basically means is we'll take off, we'll climb, and then we will follow a particular instrument that we've got tuned into Wallasey, which is a navigation aid, and that will give us a track to fly to get to Wallasey, and that would conclude that part of the departure. From Wallasey we'll change onto GPS mode, and that will give us a GPS track to follow to this navigation aid called Penil, and then from there, which will probably be covered in another video, that would take us, we would track the non-directional beacon, an NNDB, to track to the hold, and then we would use that beacon as an instrument for the actual hold, which we would plan the holds from. And then from the hold we would go to another navigation aid called Toville, or another GPS beacon called Toville, and then from there we would actually follow the RMP, a GPS approach to runway 28 at Blackpool. So that's the approximate route. We can just go on to the nav log. In fact, we can actually set this approach. So we've got the RNAV 28 approach. In fact, we're going to we'll take that one out because it's actually just as a flight sim thing, it's actually disrupting the route a bit. So we can do that afterwards. We'll add that later on. Flight conditions are real world weather, and for this video I'm going to be using the Cessna 172. In reality, at the moment I'm flying this in real world in a PA34 Seneca, which is a multi-engine aircraft. For this purpose I'm just going to be using a Cessna, because I don't want to be doing too much in other aircrafts and that I'm not using at the moment. So flight conditions normal, let's get on and fly. In fact, one other thing we'll do first of all is we'll just set the cruise altitude at 8,000 feet. So that's because we're going to be using an even number, which is generally for flight levels where we're flying to the west. We'll have an even number. When we're flying towards the east, we would have an odd flight number there. So we're happy with that. We've got the different things set in there. So we've got real world conditions, aircraft, we've got the real, so it's just actual real world traffic or live traffic, and group simulations off at the moment, and live weather. So we can select ready to fly on this one, and then it will just load up and take us to the apron over at Liverpool. So just one that was we allow that to load up. Basically, one of the things I wanted to do recording this was to for a couple of purposes really. One is it's good practice, as I've said, to just practice the routes and really armchair fly them to an extent, and also I thought it's useful for certain people who can see family members and what have you who are isolating for one reason or another. They can also watch the progress as well. And of course, if anyone finds it useful just for flying this route, whether you're a flight simmer or a real world pilot, a PPL pilot that's considering going on to instrument training, then that's a bonus as well. And I quite enjoy doing the loading up the videos and seeing how they go down. Just takes a while to just load up this one, but I wanted to really show you the initial start of how I actually set that flight up on the flight sim as well for the instrument flying, because it's something that when I started on the flight sim it was all very very complex to us to start off, and it's only when you get to learn a bit more about it that it kind of makes a lot of sense to you. Okay, so we've here at Liverpool, we can see the weather conditions. That's looking out over the River Mersey. We've got visibility of 6.6 nautical miles. We've got some details on the aircraft there as well, and we can see that we're in the we're on the apron there where we need to be. So there we go. Just for anyone who's not aware, this is like the heli centre that you've got here. High level of realism. There's the Raven Air hangars and the Raven Air basic office, operations offices and what have you there as well. So there we go. We're ready to fly. Wind 6 knots at 348 degrees, so very much northerly wind there as well, but very low wind, so we've that should make things quite straightforward. So if we go ready to fly, and then I'll just take you through some of the setups that I'll be doing at this point as well. Now, with just a little bit about setting up checklists. Checklists will be specific not just to the model of aircraft but to that company's aircraft, so it's very important to use the correct checklist, because there will be slight adjustments to different things where there's different nav aids or there's different bits of equipment that different companies will fit in individual aircraft. So even for somewhere like Raven Air, you've got the two PA34s. There will be slight differences in the actual panel, so it's very important to use a checklist that's kept up to date with adjustments that are made to that aircraft. And you will follow the checklist by the letter in reality. That's the whole point of it. You'll go through it one by one in the exact order and follow it through. Now obviously for this Cessna here I've not got the checklist, so it's going to be a bit more of an abbreviated version, and if it went through the full thing it would be taking a very long time really, the videos, but I may do future videos looking a little bit more at checklists, perhaps in the real PA34 as well. So just for now we're going to I'm going to talk you through it as much as I can. If anyone picks up anything that's they've got a question on, by all means let me know. But what we're going to do here is we're going to use the automated checklist at certain points just to speed things along a little bit. So first of all, we'll have the pre-flight inspection. Before we've even got in the aircraft, and probably the night before, we'd start looking, or I would start looking at the weather conditions. I will have done updated weather condition checks and everything on the morning of the flight, and then we'll keep up to date with those as well. I will have done the fuel planning and the calculations for the mass and balance, depending on how many people are going to be flying in the aircraft at that time, and also be checking the NOTAMs, the notices for airmen, and any other relevant things, including booking out with ATC and booking in the approaches with the actual ATC unit of the destination airport. Also looking at different things like weather, if we need to select alternate, or different contingency issues that we need to look into as well. So that would have been done along with the pre-flight inspection as well. So first of all, when we get into the aircraft, we'd do the initial checks, and we're going to auto complete that page. So we would get to, first of all, one of the things that we would do is we would get the ATIS, the Automated Terminal Information Service, and that's going to give us all of the essential data that we need for this flight. It's going to give you the wind conditions, the runway in use, different pressure settings, temperatures, any other details, and there's other stuff on there that we'd need. So we'd get that before starting the engine, so that we know all the different things and the winds and everything that we've got, runway in use, etc. So we do that initially, and we'll actually get the before starting engine checklist. So we'll do this first of all, auto complete this page, and this should give us the radios and etc. So we can do that. In fact, it's not done, but I'm going to carry on just presuming that we've got the ATIS at this point. We would shut down and then switch the avionics off, and then we would actually start the engine. I'd also get the departure clearance, and I'm going to do the standard departure calls that I would be making for the clearance here as if we're in the PA34, and the reason for that is because I'm actively learning this and I'm trying to keep it committed to memory as well. So the standard call for a departure clearance for this flight would be Liverpool Tower Raven 34 Tango PA34 at Kilo with information etc, QNH etc, request departure clearance to Blackpool. The tower would then get back to me with the departure clearance, which I would note down, and then I would read back to check that I've got that clearance correctly. So that's the first thing we do. So then we'd have our departure clearance, and then we continue with the different checks, including the engine starting. So we'll do this engine start check, and it would be a big call out first of all, checking that there's no ground crew as you get here anywhere near that could may not be aware that you're starting the engine. You'd have the beacon on ready to make them aware, so you get that flashing light as well. It'd be shout out the window, clear prop, and then we'll go through the sequence for starting the first engine, and then repeat that process for starting the second engine. When we start the engines, one thing I would be doing is, prior to starting it, revising the engine fire checklist and revising the initial checks that we need to make when we start that engine. So the engine fire checklist would be in the event of an engine fire on starting, and that would be to cut off the fuel supply by bringing the mixture fully back, leave the throttle fully open to purge the engine of any fuel, and continue to crank the starter. If that extinguishes the fire, all very good, we can move on. If it doesn't, then we would switch off fuel supply etc as soon as we can, and then switch off electrics and exit the aircraft as soon as possible. So we'd revise that, and also revising what could happen if we don't get the fuel, or if we don't get the oil pressure up to the green arc within 30 seconds. We'd also need to shut the engine off to avoid damage, and also we'd be checking the starter warning light, because if that stays on, then we need to switch the engine off so that we don't damage the starter motor, because it means that we've got a problem with it. So we then start the engine, so we'll do that for the checklist, auto complete this page. And we've got the engine started successfully there, so then we do the after starting engine, we'll auto complete that page, otherwise the video will go on for a very long time. So that's complete, and that puts us up to the stage of taxi. So in reality, what I'm going to do now is have a look at some of the checks that we would do at this point. As I say, this would be following the checklist very specifically. So let's just have a look here. What I am going to do is just let's get some the cockpit lights lit up, because it's a bit dark here, so we can just see the instruments a little bit better as well. So we can get those lights set up. We'll get rid of that. So the first things we'd be doing is we would be just going down this this box, the instrument box here. So we'd go down in order, we'd do various checks to check any warning lights are working, etc. The comms I'm not going to basically be doing too much with now, because it's going to take too long, and it's slightly different the way we'd do it to the way I'd do this on the actual route, and that will just take a lot longer actually physically turning all of these different comms numbers. What we would do is we'd have tower there, and then we'd either have approach there or Scottish if we're actually going to be joining the airways, as we would be for this instrument flight. What we would do is go to we need to test the navigation aid. So we'd go, first of all, we'll select the Liverpool ILS, so that's 1.75, so we'll flick that, and then we'll select 111, not on that, right. So select, shows I'm rusty. I've got a little bit rusty there because I've gone for the wrong one there, but there we go. If I got rid of every mistake, it'd be a very long process putting this video together. So 111.75, So we'll put that into the active. So we can see that the OBI reading is tuned into the Liverpool one now. So we select it there and we select identify and display. So we identify it, there's two ways. So nav1, we listen out for the Morse code, and that will be specific to the runway in use. So we check that, we have to do that lawfully to check that it's working before we can use the instrument. And then the display, we would make the display as to what we require for that particular nav aid. We're not going to do that for Liverpool yet because we're not going to be using that one first of all. We're going to be tuning it into Wallasey. The other way we can identify it is if it auto-idents, then we would basically, on the climb out, we would say auto-identified Wallasey. And when we've done that, and it will actually display that we've auto-identified it. So the first nav aid that we're going to be using is Wallasey. So I'm going to select the frequency for Wallasey, which is 114.1. And then we can flip that into the active as well. Now, if I get the standard instrument departure for Wallasey, we'll be showing the initial track will be 297 degrees, and that will allow us to track inbound on the Wallasey R117 radial for this one. So what I'll do is I'll select that into the instrument itself. So I'll select 297. So there's 297, and the idea is that when I take off, I will climb out straight ahead for a certain distance, and until I get to this radial, and basically this bar will start to move in laterally to the centre. As that moves in, I'm going to coordinate the right turn to the idea. The objective is if that white bar there is centralised, and I can keep it centralised by making a wind corrected heading, then it means that I'm flying inbound on that particular radial, which on the instrument, just to show you here, when that bar is centralised and I'm maintaining that as centralised, it will mean it represents I'm flying on this exact track here. So as I take off from here, the bar will be off to this side. As I start to get closer and closer to the radial, this bar will start to move in. As it moves in, I'll make the turn to intercept that radial, and that's basically what a radial intercept is. And that's how we navigate this particular departure. So we've got that set first of all, and we can see that now we've got it tuned into the active. We're showing that the VOR in use is Wallasey, and we're showing the current radial that we're on, which is 109, and it's showing us a distance to 11 miles to Wallasey. What we'll also do is we check that the DME is identified, so we check that, and we're probably not going to get it because, oh, there we go. So it's actually picking it up anyway. In reality, we do that DME at the same time that I did the nav1 check, first of all, when we tuned into Liverpool. So we've done that. We can check the flight plan on here, and the flight plan, we will go into flight plan mode, and then we will check that all looks correct. So we've got the departure over to Wallasey, en route section over to Pennell, and then over to Blackpool after that. And there'll be a few adjustments we'll make in here because we'll put the NDB on here that we're going to be tracking to, and we'd also load the approach as well, that we're going to be using the RMP approach. So if we go back to flight plan mode, I'm going to do that a little bit later just so that we're not burning up too much time on this particular video. So we move down the box now, and we go to box 2. Here we'd select the ATISs, so we'd have the ATIS, the Automated Terminal Information Service for Liverpool, which we'll use on the way back, and we'll use now anyway. And we'd also load the frequency in for Blackpool there as well, so that all we need to do is select it, and we'll be able to get the information we need as prior to briefing the approach into Blackpool. We've got the same option on box 2 in case we have a navigation failure on box 1. So again, we'd change that to select the navigation beacons. So let's go, so navigation display, so we'd select Liverpool 111.75, and then we would select nav2 on there. In fact, we need to just flip that into the active, and we would identify that by Morse code again. And I don't know if you noticed, but the nav2 needle moved there as well. So we're happy with that. nav2, just get those out of the way. So navigation 2 is identified, so what we can do is we can flip that, and then we can tune, in fact actually do that, we'll tune Wallasey in this one, so 114.1. We can flip that into active, and again we've tuned Wallasey on here, so we'll need to identify that, which I think we'll be able to do that from here. So identify Wallasey, so Wallasey is identified, now we can use it. And then again we'd mirror this instrument, so if this instrument failed we'd have a backup here in 2. So again we want the same track that we're going to be flying inbound to Wallasey, which was 297, which will load onto here. So we've got that loaded for 297, so we've got our backup instrument there as well. So we're happy with that. We've got the autopilot here, which I'll use when we're allowed to use that, so I'll leave that for now. In fact, what I'll do is first of all I'll just put the first kind of altitude that I think that we may be using if they don't give us a flight level first of all. So we need to cross Wallasey at 4,000 feet, so I'll just put that in for now, just to give us that option. The squawk code, we'd be given a squawk code on the departure clearance, but this is going to automatically do it. But the squawk code, basically, we're on standby at the moment from the ground. As soon as we are cleared for takeoff, and we enter the actual runway, the active runway, part of the checks that we do just as on entering that will be to check that we're on alt mode, and basically that means that ATC can see us and it will show our altitude as well and identify us once we're on the ready to take off. They will give us a code that we can use, that's the particular one that they want us to use for that kind of departure. And again, this is the system where you can use the various emergency codes as well to transmit that. The next one we would use is we'd check the NDB or the ADF, so the automatic direction finding, and again we would select identify and display this one. For some reason the Liverpool one doesn't work on this one. So normally what we would do is we'd select it, we'd identify it through the ADF there, check it through Morse code, and then we would tune in the Blackpool one as well, so that's ready on standby. So I'll do that now, just tune into the Blackpool NDB, which is 318, so we can go 38 and press that to get the ones. So there's 318, and we can flip that across. And another check that we do, if we were able to check the one and we were able to tune into the Liverpool one here, I would simply change that from ADF to antenna mode, and what you would do is you would just check that the actual needle over here moved along from the wing at the moment, so it's selected pointing at the wing tip now, and it would just tune, that would just check, it would flip to where the actual direction of the NDB was as you change from ADF to ANT mode. But we're not going to worry about that for now, because as I say, that's just a bit of a flight sim thing. For some reason it doesn't work. I don't know why. If anyone knows, then just let me know in the comments. I'd appreciate that. So that's the initial setup going there. So we can just have a look now, and we'd look along at the instruments and we'd check these as well. So we'd check the airspeed, all looks okay. we would check that the AI, the attitude indicator, looks okay. We would check that this very important instrument, the altimeter, is set correctly, and at the moment this is set for the QNH, which is a pressure setting for mean sea level, and that's the one we would use here. I mean, I could go into explaining quite a bit about this. There's at least 4 different pressure settings that we would use, but there's really only 2 that we would use regularly. We'll use one, the QNH, which is the pressure at mean sea level, which means that this shows Liverpool Airport's airfield elevation. The other one, main one that we would use, is the standard pressure settings at the 1013 hectopascals, which is what we will use when we transition into the flight levels. So when we go on to flight levels, as we climb up and we're cleared to the first flight level, then one of the first things we would do is set 1013 on here, and that would give us the standard separation that basically all of the aircraft that are using the flight levels, when they're all set at 1013, it will all keep them the same level and same clearance away apart from each other, wherever they are, regardless of various different regional changes to pressure settings which you will get in reality. So we check that, we're happy with that. We check that we've tuned here for the first radial that we're going to use, or the first bearing 2 that we're going to be used. That's all ready. We'll check the turn coordinator, that all looks okay. We'll check the headings. So the first one we're going to be using, we're going to be flying, we're going to be set to fly a west, because we're going to be using runway 27. I've just realised I've gone the long way round with this instrument, which is a big no-no. You're supposed to take the shortest route, so we're not wasting time with this, but slap on the wrist for me for that one. So yes, what we do with this one is we would align it with the magnetic track from the runway, which for Liverpool it's runway 27, but the actual track would be 267, and that would be the nil wind, basically the nil wind heading. So what we'd do is we would also take into account the wind. At the moment, when I checked the ATIS, it was 6 knots, basically pretty much a northerly wind, which in reality is going to make that little difference. I'm just going to leave that as 267. But if there was a significant wind from the north there, crosswind, we would work out using maximum drift an appropriate heading to put the aircraft nose into wind slightly, so that we maintain the correct track against the ground, across the ground. So yeah, check the VSI is all good, the nav2 is all good, engine revs in reality would be a bit higher than that, and the NDB, we've checked that. The checklist would command us to check all of the engine instruments as well, so we'd check all of those, and then we'd be checking things like the CO2 monitor and things like that. And that, you can see it takes quite a while just going through those, which are abbreviated, but obviously it's taking a little bit longer just explaining them. But really these initial checks when you first start can take a long time, and then they basically get quicker and quicker as you start going through and you get more familiar with the instrument. So you do get them down to about probably 10 minutes or so. So yeah, we're let's just see how we're doing for time. Not sure just how long this video's run, but what I'll do is I will start the taxi to the runway holding point. I don't know if this fella's getting a bit bored here or he's listening out to something. It always makes me laugh this. You get the option to push back as you get with a bigger aircraft here, whereas reality in this apron we're not really going to be doing that. So yeah, what we would do is we would be ready to go now. So we check we're all ready, we'd have a good look out, and the next thing we would do is we'd get our taxi clearance, and taxi clearance would be Liverpool Tower Raven 34 Tango at Kilo, request taxi. Then they would give us the taxi clearance, which I would write down and then read back that taxi clearance to check it's correct. As soon as we get that clearance, we're expected to move straight away. You can't really, when you're operating commercially, at a big airfield like this, you can't be having any kind of delay when you've been given that clearance. So you've got to be ready to go as soon as you've got that clearance. It would be throttle to idle, parking brake off, good look around, and then start the initial power to taxi. I'm going to make a turn to the right there, and then the first thing I'm going to do is drop the power back and then test the brakes. Power back again, and then ask the instructor or the examiner if they wish to test their brakes, which most likely they will do, and then they will test their brakes, and then they will give the aircraft back to me as well. First thing I should have said is that we'd put one of the landing lights on. On the Seneca it has 2 landing lights. I'd put one of those lights on just for taxi. And then the first thing we want to do is a taxi check, taxi instrument check. We can't do that on the apron, but as we come off it we can do. So it would be compass decreasing for a left turn, DI decreasing, turn left, ball right, AI steady, or AI steady. We normally do the ADF needle as well on this one. Just checking our different taxiways, and we would check the ADF needle, and that's tracking as well, so it would be ADF tracking. For Liverpool, if we're using runway 27, which means we're going to be flying out to the west, then we would use this taxiway here. So that means that we've got a right turn, and that will just give us the time to be able to do the right turn taxi instrument checks. So as we make the right turn here, the right turn would be compass, we can see that's increasing at the top. The DI we can see is increasing. The turn coordinator we can see we've got a right turn and the ball left, and AI is steady. In reality, ADF tracking at that point as well. So we'll apply the parking brake, and we're now at the holding point for runway 27. Parking brake applied, and they would go back to 1200 RPM. So I think at this point I'm going to leave this video for now because the time is pressing on. I'm going to start the next one at this point, which will come as video 2. And then for video 2 I'm going to go over the power checks and the pre-takeoff checks, the pre-takeoff briefing and the departure briefing. And then what we'll do is we'll actually fly the departure over to Wallasey, and explaining that and the checks that we do after takeoff, etc., and just show how that intercept onto that Wallasey radial works as well. And then probably that will cover some of the en route section, and then the next video after that will cover the en route to actually tracking the NDB to the hold and completing some of the couple of holds over at Blackpool. So I hope you found that video useful and you've enjoyed it. If you have and you found it interesting, I'd be really grateful if you could give the video a thumbs up. If you'd like to follow the series that I'm going to be doing, and a few other videos as well of this nature, a few different flight sim ones, as well as some real aircraft ones as well, going over various things in the real aircraft, then I'd be grateful if you could consider, if you'd like to subscribe to the channel. If you tick the notification bell, that will give you a notice to let you know when I've uploaded any new videos. So I hope you found that useful. Thanks very much for watching, and until the next one, it's bye for now from me. Bye for now.